My name is Professor Michal from the Hebrew University Law Faculty, and I'll be delivering this part of the unit together with my colleague, Dr. Prof. This part is devoted to the legal field of intellectual property. As lawyers, we start with an important clarification. Intellectual property is a cutting-edge, intricate, and complicated branch of the law. Rules change from time to time and vary among different countries. In our talks, we will obviously not cover the details, but rather focus on the general principles. Our purpose is not to make you experts in IP, nor to provide any legal advice. We do want to clarify the general ways in which IP is relevant for innovation and entrepreneurship, make you aware of some of the general legal principles, and of the importance of seeking advice where relevant. If we think of the question you've just answered, how relevant intellectual property is for innovation, I imagine that some of you are not convinced that intellectual property has much relevance. So let's dive in and understand what intellectual property is about. Intellectual property, or as we sometimes call it, IP, is actually a group of laws, each dealing with a different topic. It includes patent law that is concerned with technological innovation, design law, which deals with the aesthetic design of industrial products, copyright law, which concerns literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, but also computer software, and trademark law that protects symbols, words, and logos, which identify certain products or services. In addition to these principal branches, there are additional IP branches that we will not discuss in our talks here. What is common to the various intellectual property rights? First, they give their owners an exclusive power to prevent others, everyone, from doing certain things with a protected IP without the owner's consent. What exactly? One principal right is to prevent others from copying the invention or the product or the content or the logo in which there is intellectual property protection. Here are some examples. A photographer who owns copyright in her photos can prevent a newspaper from copying these photos without permission. A firm that has a patent over certain pharmaceutical products can prevent competitors from manufacturing identical products. And the owners of trademarks, say the Olympic Committee who owns the Olympic logo, can prevent others from printing the logo on t-shirts and cups and other types of merchandising. The IP owners can prohibit these uses, but they can also agree to certain uses of their IP, generally for payment. And once you understand this very basic principle, that IP gives the right to prevent others, to exclude in legal language, then it starts becoming clear why it is so relevant for innovators, entrepreneurs, and also often for investors. But intellectual property is also important for society because the existence of IP protection encourages people to invest their talent, effort, time, and money in innovations and creations from which society in general can benefit. Like regular physical property such as land or buildings or gadgets, one can make transactions in intellectual property. The owner can sell and transfer their entire IP rights to others, but they can also commercialize their IP through agreements that are called licenses. Licensing means that the owners give someone permission to do specific things without transferring all the rights forever. For example, a license to distribute a patented product only in a specific country, or to use a software for a limited period, or to translate a book only to a specific language, say English or Chinese. The main difference between intellectual property and physical property is that the rights that are protected are separate from the physical object. In many cases, there is a physical object eventually, a book, a medical device, a mobile phone, etc. But buying and owning the physical product is not equivalent to owning the intellectual property rights. For example, my son just bought a t-shirt with a logo of his favorite basketball team, say the Lakers. Being the owner of the t-shirt does not allow him to copy the logo and print it on other t-shirts. These rights belong to the owners of the trademark, in this example probably the Lakers. Or suppose someone owns an original Picasso painting. Ownership of the physical painting does not give them the right to copy it or to make postcards or calendars, etc. These rights belong to the copyright owners, in this example probably the estate of Pablo Picasso. And if someone bought a Harry Potter book, this does not allow them to make copies or to adapt the book into a movie. These rights would belong to the copyright owner, and here it is probably the author J.K. Rowling. Most IP rights are protected for a limited period. After that period, which changes according to the type of right, they expire and there's no more protection, and no more power to prevent others from using the relevant technologies or creations. In legal language, we sometimes say that after the rights expire, the relevant invention or creation falls into the public domain. In general, intellectual property protection is territorial. Each country determines the exact conditions and scope of protection. However, because IP travels easily across borders, there are many international conventions and trade agreements that attempt to create some harmonization of protection and coordination between the different countries. In our talks, we focus on the broad principles of IP and not on specific legal systems, but of course there are nuances between countries, and these can be very important. IP laws often have similar structures and address a series of topics, such as what is protected, what are the conditions for protection, is there a registration requirement, who's the owner of the rights, what is the scope of protection, how long do the rights last, are there any exceptions or limitations to protection, and what can be done if someone infringes the rights and uses the IP without permission. In the next sessions, we're going to take a closer look at some of the principal IP rights to give you a more concrete idea of how things work in this field. We will begin with patents.